Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the eighth lecture on the RISSHO ANKOKU RON, which, as you, I'm sure, all know now, to the depths of your lives, is translated as on securing the peace of the land through establishing the ultimate truth. On securing the peace of the land through establishing the ultimate truth. And in this lecture, we're going to deal with the seventh question, but we'll come to that a little later, and I'll tell you where it all is in the study material you have. This is the seventh question asked by that traveler who, in the way Nichiren Daishonin framed this thesis, called in to spend the night with a person en route for we don't know where. And during the course of the evening, the traveler and his host, who represents Nichiren Daishonin, became involved in a deep discussion about the state of Japan at that particular time. And as you also know only too well by now, the importance of this great thesis is its incredible relevance to the state of the whole world today. That is to say, the chaos, civil strife, and violence which was rampant in Japan in the 13th century can now be seen in the whole wide world. Therefore, every single thing which Nichiren Daishonin says in this thesis is applicable to now. This time, for a little while, I want to consider again what Nichiren Daishonin's purpose was in framing or planning this thesis in the way in which he has. Why was it that he chose to send a thesis in the form of this dialogue between a traveler and his host to the person who was the most powerful man in Japan at that time? His name was Hojo Tokiyori, and he was a retired regent. Nevertheless, behind the scenes, he held the reins of power of Japan at that time. And on the 16th of July, 1260, Nichiren Daishonin delivered this thesis to this important man. So what really was his motive in doing that? And why did he write the thesis in the way in which he did? So of course, ultimately, obviously, the whole aim of the thesis was to try to arrange for the government of Japan, or the authorities of Japan, to see that they were following the wrong teachings, and to establish the Gonzen as the prime point of the Japanese people. This, of course, was the overall aim. But why did he set about it in the way that he did? This is what I'd like you to consider with me for a few moments. So first of all, Nichiren Daishonin's aim at the outset of this thesis was to obtain the host, or, if you like, Hojo Tokiyori's agreement or acknowledgement of the appalling conditions that existed at that time. Many times in these lectures, those conditions have been described, and I don't think there's any need for me to go into them in detail today. But basically, over a period of more than 40 years, Japan had been through the worst succession of natural disasters, such as earthquakes, typhoons, epidemics, famines, droughts, and so on, that had ever been known in the history of that country, and indeed, never since those times has there been anything quite so bad. And at the same time, throughout this period, there was a threat of civil war between the families or clans that were jockeying for power in the quite comparatively recently formed samurai government, which had started to gain power about 100 years previously. So he wanted Hojo Tokiyori, first of all, to acknowledge that this truly was the state of Japan today. And in doing this, I think that he had three aims in mind. First of all, he wanted to be sure that Hojo Tokiyori was actually facing the situation and not hiding from it or trying to turn a blind eye on it. He wanted to be sure that this man who had the powers of authority in his hands really faced the point that Japan was in utmost chaos. And secondly, he wanted Hojo Tokiyori to acknowledge that he himself, though he was the most powerful man of the day in that part of the world, had no idea whatsoever how to solve the situation. That was the second most important point. And the third, he wanted this retired regent's acknowledgement that not only he, but no one else in the land knew how to solve the problems, and that, of course, most important of all, included the various sects and religions which were in positions of protection and authority in Japan at that time. So in this way, Nichiren Daishonin was seeking common ground with the traveler who was staying the night with him, or Hojo Tokiyori. He wanted to find an area which this man would agree with him. And having found that area of common ground, he could then proceed on equal terms or on terms of understanding to reveal what he truly wanted to say, which was, of course, his revelation of the ultimate truth, or the Gohonzon. And this sequence of events is in perfect accordance with the way in which all Buddhas have taught. That is to say, he was following the sequence of preparation, revelation, and then finally transmission, which we'll come to a little later. So this preparation phase, which, by the way, it's taken us many lectures to cover, and which is in fact the greatest part of this gosho in terms of number of pages, is of utmost importance, not only in presenting a great thesis, as Nichiren Daishonin was, to the government of the times, but also in our day-to-day activities, whether we are businessmen or doctors or whatever, and most certainly in our activities for Kosen Rufu. The point about the preparation phase, which Nichiren Daishonin took so much pains to present in great detail, is that it orientates or prepares people's minds so that they are ready to absorb the revelation. Without that preparation, the revelation could easily prove to be much too indigestible to swallow. So how often, I wonder, do we find in NSUK today members and indeed leaders not following this principle? I believe more often than we might imagine. So when I was thinking about this, I made up a little story to illustrate this point of the essential need for thorough preparation. And I imagined a leader in London on the phone to a regional leader in a place which we'll call Little Muddlecombe. And so Little Muddlecombe is about 300 miles from London, long way away. And this leader gets on the phone and says, I want you to come to a meeting in London on the 6th of May. It's at 3 p.m. Someone will be able to put you up for the night, and the next day, of course, you'll be able to attend Kosen Rufu Gongyo. No, hold on, please wait and listen to what I'm saying. Oh yes, I know it's your discussion meeting day. You'll have to cancel it, I'm afraid. I know the members will wonder why, but I know it means getting up very early to get here by 3 p.m. But I'm sorry, you must please do it. Please try to understand what I'm saying. It's very important. No, hang on, please don't get upset. Give me a chance to explain. Please don't get angry. You haven't heard me out yet. The point is, the high priest's coming to London on that day. So how different it would have been, wouldn't it, if he had started off by saying, I've got some fantastic news for you. As you know, the high priest's never been to London, and we just heard that he's coming on the 6th of May. So we're inviting all regional leaders, etc., 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 etc. But I can assure you, although maybe this is a slightly exaggerated example, one hears this sort of thing happening quite often. So this system of preparation, revelation, and transmission is not something that the Buddhas need only do for the sake of spreading Buddhist teachings, but it also very much applies to all aspects of our daily life. Certainly, if we had done it in the right way, or if this leader had done it in the right way, there would have been no agitation, no confusion, no panic. And furthermore, by preparation, as I say, people are then able to absorb the main point of what they have to do and learn. So anyway, coming back to the traveller in the RISSHO ANKOKU RON, first of all, as a result of the careful preparation, the traveller was quite in agreement, wasn't he, with what Nichiren Daishonin was saying. Nichiren Daishonin said, Japan is in a terrible state, this is what it's like, and of course he agreed. But then as the preparatory phase went on, things got a bit more sticky, didn't they? Nichiren Daishonin in fact did point out to him, though not indirectly or rudely, that though he was the most powerful man in Japan, he was powerless in this situation. And so was everyone else, including the religious leaders. And it was at that point, do you remember, that the traveller began to bluster and get really angry. His pride, of course, had been hurt. Even though, no doubt, in his heart, he acknowledged that it was true, he was powerless. So we also reach this point often, or sometimes, in Shakubuku. As we're preparing the way, we find, for no reason at all, or for reasons that are quite difficult to see on the surface, that the person we're trying to shakubuku and teach about Buddhism starts to get angry, upset, irritable, or whatever. So one example, for example, is a parent approached by their son or daughter who is practicing. The parents probably have never been in the least religious, have shown no inclination towards religious practice of any sort. Yet the moment the son or daughter begins to talk to them about Buddhism, they become incredibly defensive about the religion which of course they may have inherited traditionally through birth, yet have never used. Why is this? I think there are two reasons. One is that religion which they inherited traditionally, but perhaps never really practiced, is part of the established order of things. And there is a natural human tendency to shake and panic when it appears that that natural order of things is being tampered with or interfered with, even though they may be fully aware that that established order is not particularly satisfactory and is not giving people necessarily much happiness. And the second reason, I think, is a very personal one, that because those parents were not particularly religious themselves, they feel a sense of guilt that their child, on growing up, should embrace something which to their minds is very strange, called Buddhism. And they worry that if they had been better at their own religious practice and at teaching Christian principles, maybe the situation would have been different. I think perhaps also there is a third reason, and that is that they may have a superstitious concern that the fact that their son or daughter is practicing Buddhism may bring the wrath of God on their heads. Because even though Christianity may not be practiced by so many people seriously, there is still that superstitious view about God, because no one knows what God or who God really is. So, of course, this is a specific example of a specific possible case in society. But whatever happens, when we shakabuku, at times it does hit the very core of people's lives and shake the established order of their thinking. So if we encounter such situations, Nichiren Daishonin in this gosho, RISSHO ANKOKU RON, is really showing how we should behave. Though the traveler got so blustery and angry, Nichiren Daishonin was consistently patient and compassionate in the way he spoke to him. And of course, we can think of other examples in shakabuku, can't we? We find people who, because their blindness or their refusal to look at the state of the world is comfortable, don't like the prospect of being shaken out of that situation by someone who tries to force them to open their eyes and look over their garden fence. And such people are likely to feel in their hearts, the world has always been like this. There's always been this sort of trouble going on. I know it seems pretty bad today, but it's always been there in history. There's nothing we can do about it. This is the world we live in. For heaven's sake, leave me alone. I'll just cover my ears and bury my head in the sand, and I want to forget all about it. And if everything collapses about my head, well, it can't be helped. So this, of course, is the apathetic view which many people hold. But either way, in those two examples, of course, those attitudes, in one way or another, aren't going to save the world from destruction. So Nichiren Daishonin, knowing this, then set us the example of determination, didn't he? No matter how much that traveler blustered, no matter how angry he got or upset he got, he relentlessly, politely, firmly, patiently continued with his task, which was to shakabuku him. He pursued his goal unfailingly because his prime purpose was to reach a point where that traveler could accept or at least listen to the revelation, which was the most important part of all he was trying to say. So the same should apply to us when we're involved in discussions in the process of trying to teach others Buddhism. Whatever happens, our wisdom should tell us the way to keep control of the situation until we can actually reveal the ultimate truth. So then Nichiren Daishonin went on in this thesis to analyze, didn't he, the reasons for the situation today. And first he explained the cause, why it was that everything was going wrong in Japan, or if you like in up-to-date terms, why it is that everything is going wrong in the world. And he pointed out that it was false teachings that were causing people to go astray, causing people even to slander and act against the true law, or as we know it today, the rhythm of life. And he then proceeded to prove this through the medium of the three proofs documentary or historical proof, theoretical proof, and then he gave certain examples of actual proof. Having done that, he continued, by which time the traveler was getting a little bit more easy to handle, and he proceeded to explain the effect. What he was saying in so many words, or in the words of the gosho, were, because the minds of the people are impure, or if you like, agitated and distorted, therefore, what he termed the Buddhist gods had left the land. That is to say, because the minds of the people were acting in a negative or destructive way, the relationship of those people with the forces of the universe that surround them both within their lives and outside their lives were also beginning to be motivated in a negative and destructive way. And this, of course, is the principle of Eshofune, which I think you're all familiar with. The principle of the absolute inseparability between man and his environment. Whatever the state of man is, that state will be reflected into the environment and then will reflect back onto man. So all of us in our individual ways prove this, don't we, once we become aware of this principle in our daily lives. We know, each one of us who's practiced, that in our individual lives, anger is reflected by anger. Greed is reflected by greed. And Buddha, therefore, is reflected by Buddha. So as with the individual, so on a collective basis. You get a city or a nation in which the people's lives are agitated, apathetic, destructively negative. Then the environment, which includes the Buddhist forces, the Buddhist gods, the universal forces, will react in the same way. So this he clearly explained through the example of the 3 calamities and the 7 disasters, which are brought about by people living their lives in a way which is in fact against the rhythm of life. He then proceeded to point out that the people were following these distorted views because of the actions of certain priests and monks who had taught them these views. And he pointed out that these monks, in some cases, acted as they did through the devilish influence in their lives, through their desire for power, through their pride, through their incredible egoism, or through their plain stupidity and ignorance. Then he went on to reveal the solution. The title of the thesis, indeed, the revelation, which is to secure peace in the land through establishing the ultimate truth, meaning the Gohonzon of the 3 great secret laws. So no doubt, when Nichiren Daishonin reached that point, the traveler would be saying, well, how can I know this is the ultimate truth? And this, of course, we meet in our own attempts to shakubuku. Why should this be the ultimate truth? How do you know it is? What proof have you got? And Nichiren Daishonin went on to quote from teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, particularly the Lotus Sutra, in order to show that the teaching for this age is the Lotus Sutra above all sutras. And the reason why everything was going wrong in Japan was because these sects were following either sutras which were provisional and preparatory, or they were actually denying the sutras of Shakyamuni and following the teachings of other more legendary Buddhas, such as Amida. And then finally, having passed through that stage of revelation, Nichiren Daishonin proceeds to the last phase, which is transmission. So going back to our example of the phone call to that leader in Little Muddlecombe. He should remember, or perhaps that London leader should be sure that he does remember and remind him, to explain to the members why it is that that discussion meeting has got to be cancelled, and how fortunate it is that even if only one representative is able to go to London to meet the high priest, so that those members can chant that he can make his journey without obstacles and arrive safely to attend the meeting. And no doubt it will be necessary for them to discuss when they'll hold that discussion meeting instead, what alternative day. And maybe they'd need to advise London what day it is so that someone from London can come up and support their meeting. And most important of all, he would want to say to his members, or she would want to say, I'll take you with me in my spirit, and I'll bring back everything I can from this great event so that you'll all feel as if you were there yourselves. So this is transmission, isn't it? Preparation and revelation is of little use if it's not followed by action to transmit the revelation in the actuality of daily life. So in the RISSHO ANKOKU RON, Nichiren Daishonin shows the traveler towards the end full of enthusiasm for shakubuku. We haven't got there yet, but in the last lecture we shall. The traveler is really anxious. He's totally with Nichiren Daishonin, and he can't wait to get on his journey in order to start teaching others about all that he's learned. Sadly, of course, in actuality, the regent, or the retired regent, Hojo Tokuyori, didn't accept it in that way. And hence, Japan went on for many more hundreds of years before they reached another state of great chaos, which was in World War II. And only then, because religion was freed and was no longer the prerogative of the ruling authority, only then was the Causton able to be propagated with the results which we see today. So I've gone into this method of teaching. You could say it's an enlightened method, though when you hear it, it's so obvious that one wonders why one's never thought of it before. But I've gone into it in some detail because this is the method that we are going to use. When I say we, all of NSUK is going to use when we put across the message of Causton Rufu to the general public at our World Peace presentation in March 1983. So that is my revelation to you today. All that I've said up to the present is preparation for you to be able to understand that that will be the basis, the framework, if you like, of this great exhibition or presentation, we haven't found the right word for it yet, which we, all of us, through our strong daimoku and action, will present to the public on a scope wider than we've ever before been able to do it in NSUK. When this lecture is over, which will be only in a couple more minutes, some of the members, after a break, who have been sitting on the committee in order to begin the planning of this most significant event, will continue to give you more information, or if you like, revelation, about the shape that this presentation is going to take. And they will then go on to enter the transmission phase. How the beginnings, if you like, of how you all and everybody in the UK can help towards the ultimate success of this extremely important event. And I think it will also be exciting to you to know, those of you who have patiently come to all these lectures on the RISSHO ANKOKU RON, that the ingredients of this presentation within the framework of preparation, revelation, and transmission will be founded of course in modern terms, on the RISSHO ANKOKU RON. So this is an extremely exciting prospect. And provided we achieve it, on that foundation which Nichiren Daishonin taught us, I believe we cannot fail. So, in a few minutes' time, we'll have a break and begin that presentation. But just to make sure that I do a little bit of lecture on the gosho and advance it even if only a little way, we'll deal first with question 7. So question 7 is on page 23, those of you who have got the Sacred Times extract, or on page
31 of volume 2 of the major writings of Nichiren Daishonin. Page 31 in volume 2.
Okay.
The guest, continuing to speak in a mild manner, replied, "One could hardly say that Honen is the only one who disparages sutras and speaks ill of other priests, since you do the same thing yourself. However, it is true that he takes the 637 Mahayana scriptures with their 2,883 volumes of text, along with all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the deities of the heavenly and human worlds, and urges people to discard, close, ignore, and abandon them. There is no doubt that these 4 injunctions are his very words. The meaning of the passage is quite clear. But you keep harping on this one little flaw in the jewel and severely slandering him for it. I do not know whether he spoke out of delusion or out of true enlightenment. Between you and Honen, I cannot tell which is wise and which is foolish, or determine whose assertions are right and whose are wrong. However, you assert that all the recent disasters are to be traced to the Senchakushu of Honen, speaking quite volubly on that point and elaborating on the meaning of your assertion. Now surely the peace of the world and the stability of the nation are sought by both ruler and subject and desired by all the inhabitants of the country. The nation achieves prosperity through the Buddhist law, and the validity of the law is proven by the people who embrace it. If the nation is destroyed and the people are wiped out, then who will continue to pay reverence to the Buddhas? Who will continue to have faith in the law? Therefore, one must first of all pray for the safety of the nation and then work to establish the Buddhist law. Now, if you know of any means whereby disasters can be prevented and troubles brought to an end, I would like to hear about it.
Thank you. So as you can see, the traveller's attitude has changed considerably, and he's getting much calmer. And for the first time, he acknowledges Honen's errors. Honen, you remember, was the founder of the Shingon sect. This was the teaching which denied all of Shakyamuni Buddha's sutras and taught the existence of a pure land in the west, and made some reference to 3 sutras of Shakyamuni's where he had mentioned the existence of this legendary heaven or land. So you can see towards the end of that first paragraph that the traveller is getting thoroughly confused. He says, between you and Honen, I cannot tell which is wise and which is foolish, or determine whose assertions are right and whose are wrong. I think you could say that today that question could be put by many people too. Who is right? Who is wrong? What is right? What is wrong? Of all the plethora of teachings and philosophies and information that pours into our heads, and which we can read so easily through the huge numbers of books that are published in these days and available to us all, through the television, through the newspapers, and every form of mass media. In this connection, I think it's interesting to hear what Sensei said recently in a speech to the Youth Division leaders last December. He said, the times have been changing from an age of materialism to an age of the mind, from an age of the mind to an age of life. People have begun to awaken to the fact that the true value of happiness only exists within one's life. It can be said that the age where one's greatness was measured by fame or wealth is completely over. The main characters in this age of ordinary people are ordinary people. So changing times have always caused confusion in people's minds. Quite naturally, we talked earlier of the established order being shaken. So of course, there are still plenty of people in this world following that old philosophy of materialism, still believing that they can obtain happiness through material possessions. On the other hand, there are others, aren't there now, who are pressing forward to find the truth. And I believe these numbers of people are steadily increasing. So this, of course, is a wonderful thing for us, isn't it? We're at a point of change where people are dithering, thinking, wondering which way to go in order to find happiness. Recently, too, we've seen something of a religious revival. It's not very strong,
Really?
but nevertheless it exists. And it's been happening now for perhaps 10 or 15 years or more. But there has been a revival in the seeking minds, especially of youth. People with courage are trying to grope their way, aren't they, out of the fog of the old beliefs and philosophies, and especially knowing beyond a shadow of doubt that happiness does not arise simply and solely from material possessions or wealth. So this is the age of the mind that Sensei is talking about. What is right? What is wrong? The age of the mind is people seeking to find the truth. And of course, we, practicing Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism, are quite convinced that the Gohonzon is the ultimate truth. And we prove it in our lives every day. Even so, there's no doubt that our British characteristic of wishing to be tolerant and our sense of fair play often makes us feel that we shouldn't knock anyone else's beliefs. We prefer to say, don't we, in our hearts, many of us, what we would really like to say is, there are many ways to the ultimate truth. If you feel happy doing what you're doing, please go on with it. And my answer to that is, yes, please go on saying that. But not with the idea that Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is one of the many alternative ways to enlightenment. Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is enlightenment, isn't it? Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is not a path to enlightenment. It is enlightenment in itself. I don't think we heard the word enlightenment used so often in the religions such as Christianity and Judaism, the Muslim religion. Very rarely is such a term mentioned. Certainly, enlightenment is not contained, I think, in the creed of materialists, communists, and so on. In the religions, they talk of earning the grace of God, the favor of some omnipotent power, isn't it, which is outside of oneself. In the same way as the materialists are desiring power through material possessions which they draw from outside themselves. Whereas Buddhism, the Buddhism of Nichiren Daishonin, is saying, enlightenment is inherent in you. Just work at it Clear the cobwebs away and you'll discover it. So, Shakyamuni is Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, the Muslim faith are, I believe, truly, in our view, paths to the one enlightenment. But they are not enlightenment. They do not reveal the ultimate truth, which is Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. The enlightened or the Buddha state in life. All these religions, as it happens, certainly not by chance, appeared at round about the same time in various parts of the world. They all reached their zenith, you could say, between about 1000 and 1500 AD. And they all began to decline and lose their hold on the lives of people as a result of the growth of science and materialism. There can be many roads, I believe, to the one truth. For myself, definitely Christianity was a road to the truth. Definitely Christianity opened my religious mind, made me aware of the need for religion. Definitely for me, my years of practicing Christianity were a bridge between a non-religious life and finding the Gohonzon. Each one of these religions is leading towards the ultimate truth. But none of them can preach the existence of the ultimate truth existing in every single human being by the very nature of their makeup as entities of life in this universe.